We are going to kick off because it is 6:30, and I appreciate lots of you have come along today. But we are expecting a couple more councillors to come in, so hopefully by the time we get to the meaty options, they will have arrived. Items. So we'll kick off with apologies for absence. I have only had apologies from Councillor Sandra Thomas. I've just had apologies from Councillor Burke MacDonald. That's true. There's no urgent business been directed to me for today's meeting. Are there any declarations of interest from anyone? No, great. And are we happy to confirm the minutes from the 16th of January? Yeah, cool. And then we are going to move the agenda around a little, just to make sure we get some. We're just moving it around. And I should have said at the beginning that we are being recorded today, so just please be aware of that. It will go on the council's website and YouTube. And when you stand up to speak, can you just turn your microphone on? A little light will turn on. Please turn it off once you're finished. All reports are published online, and we're going to take them as all read by the panel. And then we're going to move from we're going to switch item 5 for item 7, and so we will have item 7 next, which is the UK Shared Prosperity Fund. Thank you very much.
Okay. Good evening. Thank you, Chair. So we have got apologies from our lead member. Unfortunately, she's unable to attend this evening, but she's asked me to introduce her two reports. So starting with the introduction to her Cabinet Portfolio Update. As you'll see from the report, outlines significant progress in terms of specific initiatives under the portfolio, inclusive economy, business and skills. Of course, she's got responsibility as well for Greenwich supports, which will be dealt with separately. I think, as you will know, this panel will know, because you've received several reports on various things to do with inclusive economy and community wealth building, that obviously is kind of a core strategy in terms of the work we're delivering, and lots of initiatives hang off of that strategy. I think just to pull out some key highlights over the last 12 months, section 4.1 to 4.10 in the report focuses on the work we've been doing in terms of the strategy and community wealth building to ensure that the wealth created in the borough is redirected and benefits local businesses, communities, and creates jobs opportunities. Earlier this month, this panel had a report on the community wealth building and the anchor partner 2 years on, and the significant achievements were set out there. One notable one being 228 million of spend with local suppliers, supporting around 25,000 jobs. So that's just across the 5 of the 11 signatory partners. We've also got another report coming to this panel this evening, which sets out the 2.7 million UK SPF programme, so I won't say any more on that for the time being. Section 4.11 to 4.2 sets out and highlights the work of Greenwich Local Labour and Business Club, and in terms of the various sort of tailored support programmes that in the last financial year has engaged 2,500 residents and supported 1,200 people into work. Similarly, our Community and Adult Learning Programme, which is a devolved programme from the Mayor of London, 2.1 million annual allocation, has supported over 3,400 learners in the last academic year. And then the current academic year that we're in, from August to February, we've already supported about 2,400 learners. So really good progress there with lots of key achievements. Just touching very briefly on the next 12 months in terms of priorities, continues to be around the work we're doing to focus on town centres across 3 fundamental streams, really: how our town centre management approach, but also how we're maintaining our town centres, particularly where we're seeing significant investment. It's important that we maintain those assets. And then the third aspect of that is how we revitalise our partnership. So that's ongoing work, as will be programmes, new government programmes through Connect to Work and Economic Trailblazer programmes, which are about 6 million over the next 5 years. So they're significant programmes which this panel has included on future work programmes. So that's probably where I'll stop, and then obviously happy to take questions.
Great, thank you so much, Michelle. Do we have any questions from the panel?
Thank you, Michelle, for that. I know that there's been a lot of focus around town centres, and that's great, and the support that we've provided. Just wondering if there's any thinking going forward, whether we'll be looking at a wider perspective on centres and investing in those, so smaller centres that we have across the borough.
Apologies, I didn't turn it off. I thought I did. So apologies. Yeah, so I think we're always obviously looking at sort of smaller areas. I think we've sought to do that in different ways. I mean, for example, through the UK SPF programme, there are some investments that have gone into smaller neighbourhood parades, Are Not Close being one, Leslie Gordon Square being another. And then also within that 2.7 million programme, we also had quite an extensive installation improvement of festive lighting across about 15 different locations. So where we can, we obviously will try to do that. Similarly with the playground investments, we did that across other key areas. I think sometimes with these programmes, the challenge is delivering everything within the time frame, and the funding that we've got for another year will need to be spent by the end of March. So that's often a key challenge. You know, sometimes when we spread ourselves a bit too thin, it's quite challenging. But we will always seek opportunities to invest in smaller neighbourhood parades where we can.
I think it requires, because you know, we don't want to spread ourselves too thin, it requires a specific strategy to do that. So not just saying that we will where there's opportunity, but to purposefully go out, develop a strategy to invest in those centres, identify them, look at what we want to achieve, why we want to focus on them, and then develop a plan to do so. So I think it's about a strategic approach to do that, not just opportunistic.
No, I agree with that. I think as well, and part of that is how we work with obviously our housing colleagues. So of the 34 neighbourhood parades, probably about 13, 14 of those are in the council's ownership. So, you know, I think that strategy needs to be developed across the piece. So that is definitely something I think we can explore as part of that future work.
So just to follow up on that, I know that we are going to look at town centres a bit more, hopefully next year, and maybe we can sort of, in addition to that item, maybe look at some of the smaller centres alongside that.
If just say as well, I mean, this is also partly because of this whole revival about communities and how we want to develop communities and local communities. So I think it's really important to that as lots of shopping goes online, what are our local communities about, and how can we develop those in a different way to not just about shopping.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that, but I probably should add things like the Shop Local and the Enjoy Local website that we've developed with Visit Greenwich is all about that hyper-local experience. That is something that is borough-wide and quite a significant amount of investment's gone into that. So again, there's opportunities to refresh that and to think of what are the specific needs of those local neighbourhood areas in terms of increasing footfall and spend.
Great, thank you very much. Yeah.
Thanks, Chair. Following on from that, I think within the borough there are examples of where smaller parades and centres have been really successfully regenerated and developed, and they're bringing more footfall. And you know, I think we're all conscious that no two parades are the same, and so they'll have different opportunities, different businesses. What can we learn from where those parades have successfully been regenerated? What's the council doing already? And how can we look at taking those learnings to other areas? I think in Eltham, the sort of prime example from my own personal experience is Westmount Parade. You know, I grew up just a road away from Westmount Parade, and when I was growing up, it didn't have very many shops. It was all, you know, perfectly fine, but you wouldn't go there as a destination. But I think you look at that parade now, and I think it really does draw people in. You've got independent businesses that are, you know, giving back to the local community. How can we learn lessons from how that parade has regenerated to try and do that or create the conditions for that to happen in other areas. And then just on town centres, I think, Michelle, we often have email exchanges about Eltham Town Centre, and I think progress is being made. I think there's a lot more, and I think we'd all acknowledge there's a lot more that can be done there. But how do we, I think an issue that you've probably experienced, and many of us have, is how do we buy in businesses and make sure that they're attending those meetings, they're feeding into those strategies as well? Because I'm sure, we all want those businesses to succeed, they all want to invest, they all want better outcomes. It's a difficult condition for anyone owning a business at the moment, given some of the national headwinds and changes. How can we get them engaged into the strategies for wider town centres as well?
So I'll probably start with that one first. I mean, so as I sort of mentioned, I think obviously we recognise that there's an opportunity here to refresh those partnerships, and it's something that we have been focusing on primarily for Eltham. So I think one of the key things we've done recently is turn those quarterly meetings into hybrid meetings, because I think the in-person meetings are great to a point, but as you say, sadly, not many businesses were coming. There's often more officers at the meeting than there were businesses. The meeting that we had last week, actually we had a significantly more businesses there and other key stakeholders joining online. I think as well, just talking to the point about, again, how do you learn from other areas? So there was quite a lot of learning that we were able to bring to discussion, particularly around sort of the work we've done in Woolwich with the Woolwich Lates. So we've also got a subgroup of that main town centre, so that's an event and marketing subgroup. And already we've earmarked future funding, subject's got to go through an approval process, but we've earmarked funding to sort of replicate some of that work. I say replicate, it's also what's unique to the area and what's going to work. So it was interesting having businesses like Bob Hope Theatre that are really bought into the work we're trying to do, but obviously we want to make that very much local to the area and based on the feedback for businesses and obviously what's unique for Eltham. So I think it's an ongoing initiative, I think, but I think, as you say, there's significant progress that's been made and we're getting some good momentum behind that. So I think in terms of just where we can learn from other areas, part of the work we've also been doing is to do town centre health checks. So that, again, can be any area where you look at footfall, you look at dwell time, you look at spend, you look at vacancy rates. All of those things we do, not just across the main town centres, but we do them on a quarterly basis across all the neighbourhood parades. And then annually we do the retail parts as well. So we've got a lot of intelligence. We've got good tools and techniques. It's then how we then turn that, as you say, into strategies and action plans to drive that improvement. So yeah.
Sorry, Chair, I haven't got my name badge and apologies, Mayor. I probably should have let you know I was coming. But just in terms of, because what Michelle and I have talked about is joining up some of the policy areas across the council as well. So through the Transport and Place Scrutiny Committee, we've been talking a lot about our property and community asset transfers and also just about bringing in more income. So driving the value, if you like, in our property base, which then supports our current financial situation. But then there's also that dichotomy, isn't there? And there's also got to be a read across to where we have a commercial interest in a property, driving best value out, that we've got to really think through what that best value is. Is it income? Is it the objectives for that certain place? So there's a bit more work that we need to do just to read across some of the policy areas of the council, but learning lessons where success is, where there's been an independent business flourishing in a particular area, and then linking that into a wider strategy, I think is a really good point well made.
So I just have another question. It's really interesting to hear you say, Michelle, that you've got good intelligence, which is great if we have that. I just wanted to understand a bit better how we're linking that to the investments and us monitoring the result of those investments. So, for example, like the festive lights, are we then going back and collecting monitoring data to understand whether, if we have more festive lights, is it generating greater footfall? Are businesses appreciative? Are they seeing revenue increases? So what kind of monitoring data are we collecting and how is that then informing future use of the funds?
Yeah, they're all really good questions. Some of that we touch on the UK SPF report, because essentially what we've also done is purchased a high street data service, which is a GLA sort of subscribed a tool, if you like, or a toolkit that we can use to assess the health of town centres. So, you know, in addition to sort of footfall, so we've got the main sort of springboard cameras for the main town centre, but with this, we can look at any geographical location. And it uses BT data, sort of pings off the mast to sort of count people in and people out. But it also then is able to distinguish that by dwell time. So you can extrapolate if they're a worker, if they're a visitor, if they're, you know, if they're, what's the other one? Shopper. And then in addition to that, we've got something that sort of looks at the trend in terms of spend. So again, you can break that down by apparel, by food, you know, it's quite sophisticated. It uses MasterCard to look at that, which is about 70% of all credit card transactions. And then it uses an algorithm to kind of capture, you know, to capture the cash transactions. But essentially, you can look at any time. You know, you can look at an event during an event or during a period like Christmas, and you can compare that with previous years, or you can compare that with non-event days. So that's how we show what the impact has been in terms of footfall, increased spend. And then in addition to that, it's about surveying businesses as well. And we're about to launch an annual survey for town centres as well. So that gives us more intelligence around, you know, increased takings and so on.
Yeah, thank you. What I didn't see in the report, thank you for clarifying that, but what I didn't see in the report was how we're then using that understanding going forward to influence or to change what we're doing. So are we then taking that on to pivot and to develop a different approach, or using that? How are we using that?
Yeah, I mean, we've been using the system for just about 18 months. So I think where we've seen that there's, you know, a benefit, where things were, we're saying more of the same in some respects. So we know, for example, themed events on high street town centres, particularly things like summer lates, you know, are big sort of additional drivers for footfall. And therefore, it's just trying to work out what kind of events will residents and businesses like to see in their specific locality, so that you're not necessarily doing the same types of events. You know, it is early days. I mean, I think we've got a lot of data, and probably we don't use it as well as we could. But I think that's part of, you know, those town centre plans that we will be developing for each of the main town centres, and then obviously there's a wider conversation of how we capture that for some of the smaller neighbourhood areas as well. So, yeah, I mean, I think there's more that can be done with it. I would agree.
All right, is there any other questions? No. So we'll go on to the next report. Thanks, Michelle.
So this is quite a chunky report, so I'm not going to say too much because it goes into quite a lot of detail, but essentially this was the UK Shared Prosperity Funding report, and this was 2.7 million of investment that the council received across three sort of priority strands: community in place, which is a combination of revenue and capital, and then also support to local business was the second strand, and then people and skills were a third strand. You'll see in the report, we've kind of, sorry,
Michelle, I just want to make sure everyone knows which one we're on.
Yeah.
It's because it's the UK Shared Prosperity Fund update. Number 7, yeah, UK Shared Prosperity Fund. Sorry, Michelle, Karen.
No worries. So just in some of the key highlights in terms of the communities in place, because, I mean, the report is self-explanatory, but we've worked with Celsea, South East Energy, Community Energy, I think they're called, London Community Energy. They provided support, advice for 450 businesses, just in terms of how they could look at things that will help to retrofit their homes, to make their homes more energy efficient. 84 of those households have gone on to install different measures. We've had 5 capital projects as well. I've touched on the community festive lightings, community playgrounds were another initiative. We secured additional funding to improve additional investment in the Pavilion Cafe, which is part of the Future High Street Fund in General Gordon in Bereford Square. We've looked at those events. So again, you'll see in the report that footfall on the 27 events that we've delivered over the period of the investment, footfall has increased by 50,000. I mean, there's a lot more, as I say, we can go to dig deeper into that and exactly who came, what postcode areas. It's quite sophisticated and you can go into that level of detail. So, you know, if that's something of interest, then we'll be happy to provide sort of extra detail on there. Just really wanted to give you really a snapshot. But in terms of the support to local business, there's been something for every stage of business, and we actually have one or possibly two businesses here this evening that have been beneficiaries of the programme. But in total, 900 businesses supported, 180 jobs, you know, either safeguarded or created new jobs. And then in addition to that, we've had over 100 grants out to local businesses. Again, people and skills, significant sort of progress in terms of either meeting or exceeding targets by some margin, but supporting around 243 people into work. And as I touched on, we've also got an extension of that programme, which is going to go through a formal decision process, but just slightly over another $1 million's been secured for this financial year. Majority of that, again, is capital, and some of that is revenue to continue with some of the business support programmes. So happy to take some questions on that.
Can I just add, obviously, introduce you to Mercedes, who's one of the businesses who benefited from UK SBF funding, to say a few words. I did invite someone else. Unfortunately, she's unable to attend tonight, but she did ask me to say a few words on her behalf, so I could do that after maybe Mercedes has said a few words about how she's benefited from the
Yeah, that would be
programmes.
great, and thank you so much for taking the time to come this evening.
Hi, so my name's Mercedes and I run a small business in New Eltham. We received a grant from Startup Greenwich, and it is on its way, but we have had one-to-ones with Startup Greenwich, which has been really supportive as well, with experts all from Greenwich, which has been amazing. And now we're on pathway to franchise our business, and that's because of the grant and the one-to-ones that I've had. It was always been like a little pipe dream of mine, and because of the opportunities that I've had from Startup Greenwich and South East Enterprise, I've been able to actually do it now, so yay.
Do you want to say a few words about what your business is as well?
Yeah, so I run a business called For Your Party Weddings and Events, and we decorate and style weddings, parties, corporate events all across South London and West Kent, but we do it a bit differently. So we try to be really sustainable. We don't supply any single-use plastic. We don't supply any balloons. All of our props and decor are handmade using reclaimed wood, and we plant a tree for every single booking that we do. We've got a little electric van that we drive around Greenwich, and we're carbon neutral and on track to be net zero by 2030. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much for coming, and yeah, your business sounds amazing, so yeah, really glad that we were able to support you. Do you want to, do your statement from the other business?
Do you want me to say a few words on behalf of the other person? Is Dr. Shri Ditta, who was supposed to be here tonight, but unfortunately he's actually in theatre on an emergency operation. She's a surgeon. But she also runs a company called Her Healthcare, which is a community company that specialises in women's health and well-being. And she secured some support from one of our other business support programs for generative businesses, which is run by CNT Associates. So it's one of 5 different business support programs that this funding supported. And she was successful in securing not only one-to-one support, but a small business grant of £800 to help her deliver a range of women's healthcare and well-being seminars, webinars, and face-to-face sessions with women to promote well-being and health, but obviously not to look at interventions, more preventative, and also to think about things that can be done with a non-medical emphasis. So changing the way in which people view access to healthcare, for women particularly. And unfortunately she can't be here today, but she's absolutely delighted with the support she received from CNT. I'll just read out what she said. It was an absolute delight to be able to serve my local community in a different way to that which I'm used to doing. I found it immensely rewarding to be able to educate and inform a population group which I did not normally have access to. So she's a consultant gynecologist, and so she runs this business as well alongside that work, and it's community orientated. And she said, I fully benefit from the support the CNT team gave me and support from the local community was able to provide in making the project a success. So it's a nice little story. And there are lots of others that we could provide. Unfortunately, getting them along to a scrutiny panel in the evening is somewhat challenging because they're busy running their business. But yeah, I just thought it'd be useful to have a little bit of colour.
Yeah, it's really, thank you for taking the time to invite them and again for coming along. Hand over to anyone got any initial questions for the panel? Or yeah?
Thank you again for coming and speaking. I'd be interested in hearing a bit more about your thoughts on how this support has worked. Is there anything more that we could have done or that would have been helpful for you to have? And as you, I guess, come off this support, do you feel that you have the necessary backing to do that?
I think the support I've had has been amazing. I think there's one little issue is there's always a gap in between when support starts and then it starts back up again. So I know I've noticed that at Startup Greenwich, I had a one-to-one planned for May with the person who's supporting me with my franchising, but I think the funding has stopped. So they're waiting to find out if they're going to get funding or not. So my one-to-one's been cancelled. So that's the only thing that I would say, and I have found that over time, since starting my business in 2018, that whenever there is funding, there usually is like a gap where everyone's waiting to find out what's going to happen. It'd be really great if they could find out maybe a couple months before it ends, if it's going to continue or not. But I guess things work differently in the council.
Yeah, so we're kind of at the mercy of the GLA somewhat with this funding. So we have secured an extension to the funding that allows us to continue with the business support that we offer. There's a lag, as you mentioned, Mercedes, where we're waiting for the final approval of the grant agreement, which is always a problem. We've asked if GLL are prepared to proceed at risk in terms of not having a contract to deliver the service. But obviously we need to give them some reassurances before they do that. The money has been allocated to the council. It's just a matter of how we spend it and how that's set out in a formal agreement. One of the business support programs which we will continue with is the one that Mercedes access. So she will get a further one-to-one business support. It's not gone and forgotten, but it might be, we might still be able to do it in May. It might be the following month. But yeah.
Are we able to arrange our funding in a way that allows for a bridging period? So to hold back funding for a bridging period to allow for any kind of gaps like this? Because I can imagine it would be very disruptive for the business to have that.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, I think it's the nature of sort of time-limited funding, and I think with the UK SPO programme, for the programme, all the funding needs to be committed and spent out the door by the end of March. So obviously that's done and dusted, and then we've only just in the last sort of 4 weeks had notification of what the allocation is for this year. So at a certain point we didn't know if there was going to be any continuation funding. As I say, we've now been allocated additional funding for business support, which will continue. It's, the providers could deliver at risk, but I think if we can get that assurance from the GLA that's agreed our high-level plan, and then it's a comfort letter, then we can sort of proceed. But obviously we would want to be cautious about that. I mean, there seems to be no reason why we wouldn't approve the allocation of additional funding. So in that respect, the money is ours, but obviously we do need to go through the full sort of due diligence.
Great. Any other? Yeah? Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. This is a bit of a parochial question, but in Cuttysart Gardens, it says that the works are complete in April. I know they've been slightly delayed until after the marathon, I believe. But it also says in 5.1 that there was a significant underspend that was kept as a contingency, and that's been spent elsewhere. How do you know you won't need the contingency if the works haven't been carried out?
So we have an accurate estimate. We've paid for the works to be carried out. That's all gone out the door already. There was a contingency that wasn't utilised or needed for Cuttysart Gardens because we built it in, but actually we didn't need to use it. What we have done, though, is we've done more work in Kiteside Gardens around the replacement of bollards, lit bollards, so they're all the same style. Some of them had failed, so we're just going to replace those all. There has been some use of that funding elsewhere on the other sites as well, though, at Arnott Close and Leslie Smith Square. So it's not all been, the underspend's not all been spent in Kiteside Gardens, but we didn't need to use it all. We didn't need to use the contingency, in other words.
So while we're going back onto some of the improvement projects, I just wondered, as were local businesses sort of consulted as you, I'm sure they were, but I guess because we were talking about how we improve our high streets, and the businesses know, you know, what they, when we go down to, they've got lots of demands of us as local councillors and things that they want to see improved. I guess, how are they kind of consulted, and how do they feed into some of this at the outset?
So those are the physical improvements that we talked about. Yes, so the three areas that we factored in were Kiteside Gardens, Leslie Smith Square and Arnott Close. So there was a significant amount of community engagement, often utilising our partners in the area, so GCDA when it came to Leslie Smith Square, and Peabody when it came to Arnott Close. So there was an awful lot of neighbourhood support to allow communities to view what the plans were and to have an impact into what those plans should be as well. So it wasn't just us telling them what to do. The shops were part of that process, particularly in Arnott Close. But there was a large amount of, well, it must have spent at least an 8-week period in our consultation with everyone locally in those areas. So, and it was an interactive process. So the landscape architects did an amazing job engaging local people and making sure we got their views as to what they really wanted. And then they set out a series of options as to what that could look like. One of the things at Arnott Close was the poor access for people in wheelchairs or in wheelchairs or with prams and buggies. And so the ramp that we put in there, installed there, has greatly improved that, which is really gratifying to see, and has been already commented upon by people who use the centre, the community centre there. And also the children's playground at Leslie Square, I think, is just about to open. But we're waiting for a ROSPA assessment before it opens.
And do you use the same metrics to sort of measure footfall and different things as you were talking about earlier for these sort of smaller areas? And have you seen any difference in since you put these improvements through?
No, well, the improvements literally went in March. So it will be difficult to do that immediately, but we can use the same data source to enable us to understand how it's impacted footfall and also how it's impacted spend, albeit they're very small geographies that we're talking about here. So it becomes, the data analysts say the data becomes a bit noisy when it gets to a smaller subset, but we can see if there's been an increase in the use of those centres as a result. But it's certainly been made more accessible.
I guess my final question is, how did you decide on the areas to sort of do the investment? Obviously, we all know that we've all got areas that probably we'd like some extra money.
Well, that was quite a long-running process. I went through the summer of 2023 and was led by lead member, Councillor Lolivar at the time. We spent quite significant time identifying a long list of spaces and places, and then that was shared with members in a couple of forums, I seem to remember. And ultimately, having done the site visits and the practicality of what we wanted to do was established, and the fact that whether it was affordable and deliverable, we came up with those three areas. So yes, there are other areas that we are aware of that need that investment, but those were the best value for money, best bang for buck, I suppose.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mercedes and Dr. Dutta, for coming this evening. Mercedes, it sounds like it's been useful just from getting confirmation that those future meetings and sort of funding will take place, so that's really positive, I hope. Is there's obviously a number of businesses that have accessed this funding. I assume as a council we keep a record of the geographical spread. Is it possible to just get that for members of the panel? It'd be interesting to see where businesses are based that have ended up accessing it, and do we analyse that to see, are we over-indexing particular areas, or are the areas not accessing as much? And then I guess a left field question, but if businesses in a particular area were looking at setting up a business improvement district, could this funding be used to help them with that potentially as well? It might be anywhere in the borough of Plumstead, Eltham, Greenwich, Would it be possible to use some of this funding to help them do that? Is that something that has been done elsewhere or explored?
The answer is yes, but it would have to be, so a lot of the business improvement districts would be, there's obviously a ballot, and then there's a steering group set up, and then they would agree the priorities for the year ahead. So if it was felt from the businesses themselves that it was yeah, but certainly in terms of the demand for that, we could feed it into any discussions that may take place in the future.
I'm not aware of anywhere that does want to do it. It was
Yeah.
just out of interest. If they did, would they be able to?
Yeah, so I think, I mean, it is a good point. I think that's partly why we're looking at the partnerships. So I think when you've got effective partnerships, then naturally that might be seen as the next iteration of maybe how you formalise those arrangements and how you secure longer term investment in an area. We are having separate discussions about business improvement districts, and we are seeking to give some more information in relation to how that might pan out, and there is some funding that's been secured to look at that. So that's something that will come out in time, I think. I mean, I think just in terms of your first question, absolutely yes, we're happy to provide the geographical breakdown of the 800, 900 plus beneficiaries of the business support programs.
Just also to add to that answer, we could analyse that in relation to the contract extensions for those support agencies moving forward, so we can suggest where they might want to make a bigger geographic push this year.
Thank you. I noticed that, Dr. Data, you've joined us, so thank you so much for taking the time. Mercedes did take a few minutes just to say a bit about the business and some of the support that you've got from the council. So if you want to take a few minutes just to say a bit.
I'm sorry I've arrived late, literally finished an operation and then drove down from Essex to get here this evening. So yes, I'm Shri Datta. I'm a consultant obstetrician and gynecologist. I work both in the NHS and private sector. And one of the things that really struck me during COVID was the fact that patients are spending longer and longer accessing my care in hospital. What could I do about it? And that's where Her Healthcare was born. And it's essentially an educational service that we provide the community direct. Because I thought if I can't get the patients to see me within 2 years, and that's a waiting time to see me, maybe I can go out to the community and start educating patients on what to look for, what to eat, how to better improve their health, and take ownership directly for themselves. And that's what I started doing in 2022, got funding from Westminster Council, and then moved to Greenwich and started exploring what was available here. And the uptake and the feedback that I've had consistently has been incredibly positive, not just from people who are attending, but actually the hosts and the staff, the volunteers who happen to listen to the talks around healthy eating, menopause, smoking cessation. We do a whole range of talks. And I think as someone who is going into a very different side of things from my medical career, actually the business support side of things from CNT, from Greenwich, from Westminster has been incredible. And I think one of the soft markers which we can't often underestimate is the collaboration that we're able to do as local businesses simply by coming together at events that are hosted by each of these funders. So I'm grateful, very grateful for the funding that I've been able to obtain over the last 2-3 years. And I certainly hope to start to expand that because there's certainly a need for it as waiting lists do not get shorter despite us working bank holidays and weekends. So thank you very much.
Roshan, did you want to ask the same question you asked before, or I can ask it?
Yeah, we were just asking Mercedes before you came about the kind of support you've got from the team and whether there was anything more you would have wanted, and also as you come off the support or when the funding ends, do you feel you're in a good position to continue with what you're trying to do?
Sure, absolutely. I have to say, having obtained funding both from Westminster and Greenwich, I do have two very different experiences. And I think the support that I've got from Greenwich is far better in terms of developing my offering and my insight as a business owner and someone who wants to spearhead this further. I didn't get the same support. It's not just the financial side of things. Of course, that's helpful, but actually then being able to use that financial support to collaborate, going back to CNT to find out how to start a CIC. You know, these are things that you don't know. You don't know the ins and outs about. You don't know where to go and get funding. And there aren't very many sources of free support that are available to us as business owners. So that you can't underestimate the value of that. And that's what I think Greenwich has been particularly good at providing. So it's not just the indirect support that providers provide, but also the collaboration that I've been able to do with bigger businesses. That's been able to show me a different way of working, different way of approaching my own business, and therefore branch out stronger.
Could I just add also that CNT Associates are another of the extended business support programs, so they'll continue, hopefully, with the grant agreement agreed for this coming year as well. So we're hopeful that will continue to help community motivated businesses through the borough.
Great. I've got a slightly different question. So I saw on page 56 that, I mean, it's only a small, one of the only targets that wasn't quite met on the people and skills data was the over 50s. And I was wondering, you know, are we going to do more to try and kind of reach that demographic if we need to? But it's just, we did very well on the other targets, but let's just pick out the one that we didn't do so well on, I guess.
No, that's fair. I mean, I think I think I touched on the sort of 2 additional programs. So one of the programs that we've got, it's a pilot, it's a trailblazer for supporting more economically inactive people into work. One of our target groups for that is the over 50s. So, you know, economic inactivity is broken down into sort of different groups. Retired and over 50s, you know, it is a group, and for many reasons, sometimes, you know, necessity, that they sort of re-engage in the labour market. Some of that is around the cost of living, so we'll be providing targeted support for them. So we're hoping that figure will increase, but I think it's just sort of, you know, you can't sort of, you do as much of the targeting as you possibly can. And as you can see, we've sort of exceeded many of the other indicators, but that's just unfortunate that, yeah, we had fell slightly short on the over 50s.
Great, thank you. Yeah.
That a lot of the people that were actually supported on that program were identified through not just walk-ins, but mainly online registrations with the service, and that's something that's fairly new that we've adapted to try and have a wider reach. So when we did look back at that and thought, oh, that's the only one we've missed, but when we actually looked at some of the data around who's been requesting the support and where the demand was, it kind of aligns with the figures as they've ended up.
Thanks. And then on the some of that, you said that you've got 50,000. Was it? I can't remember the word. Footfall, the increased footfall, and I saw that the stuff with Visit Greenwich was what 10,000 or 13,000 of that. So obviously that was quite over target as well. So that seems to have been a big success project. Is there any sort of reflections on the reason why that sort of did so well, and are we going to do more with Visit Greenwich? Obviously they know what they're doing.
Yes, and yes, they do know what they're doing, and we do plan to do more. I think those 2 events have got a bit of traction, I think. So one is sort of a lunar event. Well, the first one is Diwali, so that's something that we've done in different locations. So we did it in Maritime Greenwich the year before, but the last one where you saw quite significant footfall was done on the Greenwich Peninsula. Now, there was additional funding that came with Night's Dragon, so it's a much bigger event. All-day programming as well, so it's not just maybe like a sort of an extended period, say from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m., which typically the events in Woolwich, let's say another sort of events that we do are sort of quite a smaller time frame. This was a whole day, and as I say, came with a lot more funding. And the other one is Luna, which is a New Year event, similar all-day programming. So I think it just depends on the funding levels and the duration of the event itself.
Anyone else have any questions for this item? No? All right. No, thank you so much for coming along, and thanks particularly to our local businesses. Hello, thank you very much for coming, Councillor Bauer. So the next item is the Cabinet Member update, and we haven't actually had a Cabinet Member update yet this year because we've had a couple change in Cabinet Members. So welcome, Sandra, and thank you for taking the time. I appreciate it. It's sort of at the end of this year, but we're still really happy that you've come along and are able to sort of present some of the work that you've been doing, and I guess we can have a see what you're looking at doing sort of next year as well. So yeah, I'll hand over to you to sort of introduce the report, if that's okay.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Thanks for the opportunity to kind of celebrate this portfolio, really. So you'll have received the report and had a good read through, but I'd like to touch on what I think are some of the real sort of high points of it. So the introduction of the culture strategy, rather, and the vision for 2030. So the first board meeting is due in June, and we've appointed a chair who's quite a big hitter in the sector, which is a real coup for us, and we're busy getting members for the board so we can take our vision forward. It's a really, really exciting time, and I hope that next year we'll be able to come back and talk in much more detail about it. But not only culture, but also leisure. So sports, leisure and libraries doing fantastic work. I have some colleagues here who I'm sure will be able to talk in more depth about that. We've obviously got the Woolwich new sports centre, unnamed at the moment. That's another exciting development to come. But we're making lots of investments in sport too. At Thamesmead, there's a big investment in the pool, cricket nets all over the place, that Tim will talk about if you would like that. The GP referral service into sport, new tennis courts, and a really good booking system that seems to be really working for families, so they can use those really good facilities in tennis and hopefully get us a few more stars for the future. Parks investments and in toilets and other infrastructure, some really good conversations that we're having with the Parks Forum over the Friends of the Park and the work that they are doing, and also for Parkfest rolling into the summer, and I understand that's going very well at the moment. Crematorium operating at a surplus. Things are working really well with our partners in Bexley and Dartford. Went to a meeting recently. That's all very good. The anti-racism strategy, so sort of kind of building back better within the council. The strategy will be consulted on it externally to make sure it's the right one, and that it really works for us. Greenwich Giving is in really its early days, and I've been to some meetings where we are working on kind of rolling that out so that we can offer grants up for the future. The Multi-Faith Forum, those who participate has kind of grown, the numbers have grown. There's a real appetite to do a lot of work for the community, particularly within youth engagement, which is really quite exciting. They want to do lots of work, kind of starting with a peace walk and some other things in the pipeline. But I'll kind of leave it there and invite some questions.
Marisha? Yeah. Oh, click on, right. Well, actually, you said that there was something about the tennis courts, and I don't know if there is someone here who can talk to the tennis courts, Tim. But obviously we've seen, lots of changes across the borough as the tennis courts have been invested in, and there were lots of questions from the community. So really, my question is, how has it gone, and how, what's the usage numbers like? And I could think it was in here. Oh, sorry, well, I've missed that. I guess I'm from Plumstead Common, and so we did have lots of disagreements at the time about the investment in the tennis courts, as it was quite used by lots of local community groups. And I think how's that kind of partnership worked? I know that I spoke to the cabinet member before at quite a length on how we can make sure that those community groups that are used to using the facilities for free were still could use them as much as they did before, particularly like the charities, and has that managed to sort of work? If you can answer that question, I appreciate it's a bit off piece.
Thank you very much, Councillor Cook, for your question. I mean, in very simple terms, it's been a real success. We obviously were provided over £350,000 from the Lawn Tennis Association to refurbish a number of our courts, and also, Councillor Bauer alluded to earlier, also a booking system and a gate entry system, which of course there were some concerns around the practicalities of that, but I think that it's borne out as being a really positive thing. In terms of the pricing model, we committed to keeping a third of the court time available free of charge, and that's going down very well in all of the communities, and that's across all of the courts as well, except for, I've got to say, Blackheath, which already had a history of charging. So we retained that principle and that system for Blackheath, and without any real trouble. But with the courts at Bostall Gardens, Kidbrooke Green, Plumstead Common, Outash Gardens, we've introduced a small fee, an hourly court fee of £3 per court per hour. But also the other exciting element of the payment package is an annual household pass, which allows up to 5 people from the same household to book a court every day for £30 a year. But we listened to the feedback from the consultation that we did, and we recognised that we needed to offer a free household pass for families that were were receiving income support, means-tested income support. So that's happening as we speak. So far we've got 455 annual family memberships have been taken up, and we've had just shy of 25,000 court bookings in that time. So as I said, we're really pleased. In terms of the work that we've done with local groups who have enjoyed using the courts for free before we introduce these, we're still in onward conversations with them. What we did before we opened up the booking system to anybody, we had conversations with each of them to find out, well, which sessions do you typically use for your group, for your club? And we protected that use as part of the free court tennis time. And also then anything further, we worked with them to make sure that they could access the slots that they needed to continue their work at the relevant fee. So hopefully you'll agree that we've done a lot of work in trying to engage all of those groups and trying to keep them comfortable and not feeling that they're being moved out for Machiavellian reasons ultimately. So yeah, we're really pleased, and we think it can only go from strength to strength.
Great. That 24,000. What time period is that between? Do you know? Is it in there? I can't. See. Oh, since April. There you go. It's right there. Which is great. That's a really big number. So, as you said, there was like extensive community engagement as we were sort of looking into this early on in the stage, and I think that was really appreciated by councillors and members of the community and the community groups. I wonder, as it evolves, what other kind of community engagement do you plan to do to keep it going, just to make sure that people are still happy with the kind of what's on offer?
Yeah, inevitably demands change as time goes by. So we will do various touch points with the people that are booking the courts, and also, we'll continue to speak to and engage and consult with those groups that are also using the courts on a regular basis. Another group that we will need to engage with at some point are professional coaches that have previously used the courts. just to try and work out what's a reasonable means for them to use the courts. But you know, with any workplace, there are costs associated with that, and I think it's only reasonable that they pay a contribution as well. So we need to tread carefully with that one, and but we're working through that at the moment.
All right, thank you very much. Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a follow-up question just linked to that. I know when the same change was made at Elton Park South in my ward, those courts are managed by a separate company, Twist Fizz. Is the same approach being taken with the new courts that have got charging systems and booking now, or is the council managing that themselves? I wasn't entirely sure from the report, so I just thought I'd ask.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Twist Fizz do manage those. That was part of a process that was done before we were made aware that we could access the 350,000 with the LTA. But ultimately, we have an agreement with Twist Fizz that they have to accrue a sinking fund in the same way as we're bound to do for the LTA courts, so that as and when any work needs to be done on the courts, that we know the money is there to be able to afford to do it, because that's the whole principle of the LTA's funding, is that what they don't want to do is throw a load of money at bringing this courts up to scratch, but then in 10, 15 years' time they're facing the same problem, that their stock of publicly accessible tennis courts have all gone to rack and ruin again. So that was a really fundamental part of the agreement and the money that we received. But yes, we've got the same safeguards in place at Eltham.
Perfect. Thank you, Kate. And then just on sports facilities, in more general, there's obviously, I received Tim's email earlier about 2 new cricket squares in my ward, which is great news. But what does the council do in terms of looking at private facilities alongside where we're adding facilities or where we have facilities to ensure that, you know, demand is there, one, but two, I think one of the issues that has come up quite often, again in Elton Park South, are the football pitches and the fact that they're not in the best condition. And quite often clubs will, you know, go to the STC, they'll go to Eltham Town, they'll look to those pitches instead. What's the council's view on it? Is there a plan to increase and improve the facilities and the pitches in the areas we've got to try and draw some of those teams there? Because I think we're all aware, you know, there's never a shortage. There's always teams that want to use those football pitches. So what are we doing to ensure that actually our pitches are up to scratch and that teams will come and use our pitches rather than going elsewhere?
Yeah, thank you very much, Councillor Davis. That's a good question and very timely, because we're currently having our updated playing pitch strategy done, and we've procured consultants to do that for us, and we're following the Sport England sorry, I've forgotten the word. Framework, absolutely. Thank you very much, Councillor Bauer. The Sport England framework for doing such, so we know that it will be signed off by Sport England. So I think, Tim, we're currently at the point where the consultants are engaging and consulting with users of the parks. So what will happen, it will be a full, robust report with recommendations on exactly that. Do we have sufficient pitches for all of the sports that we want to deliver? Are they of sufficient quality? And also, it will, and the other thing is, it always involves the national governing bodies of sport. So, as you said, and with the money we've had for the cricket facilities in all of the parks, because we've been working with the ECB, the English Cricket Board, on that particular project. That means they do all of that data analysis behind the scenes. They know where their target areas are, where the demand will be. So we're fully confident that that's taken care of. And obviously what we will do as part of the playing pitch strategy, we have to have a governing body forum once the work is done, just to keep track and to give a voice for each of those governing bodies, and they hold us to account to make sure that we're doing all we can to deliver any practical solutions that have been identified as part of the strategy. I don't know if you want to.
Yeah, I just want to add as well, obviously it's all going to be signed up by Sporting, and it's all, the playing strategy will be part of the local plan as well, and the investment process. And again, we've got, with the PPS, as we call it, it gives us the lever to bring in external funding, and it also potentially, looking at them pitches, in particular, any pitches that need repair, potentially we can get external funding for it.
No, that's great. Thank you so much, Kate and Tim, for coming back with quite an extensive answer there. In terms of the playing field the pitches strategy, is that due in the summer then alongside the same time as the local plan?
Yeah, we hope to complete that by July.
Okay.
We need to get it signed. I need to go through the process and get it signed off by Cabinet. It'll probably be September. But Sporting will give us a rider for the local plan in relation to that.
Yeah, Councillor Hannon.
Thank you. I just had a question about the adventure play centres. You said that there's 5 of them, and that you'll be doing a review of these to look at how they can transform youth play. Can I just ask a little bit more about this review and what it entails, and whether we can influence what the review will actually include?
Thank you, Councillor Hannon. So the review is part of the budget proposals, as you'll remember. So there is a proposal that we would make an investment to make a saving. But both the leader and I feel that it needs much more mapping out, especially across the range of youth services that we offer in the borough, to make sure that the adventure play centres that are there now are in the right place. And if they are, then what are we offering and what else is offered locally, to make sure that there aren't gaps, and that where there are efficiencies, we can make them in. So there's a lot of work being done at the moment in children's services to look at what's being delivered in the community. And we will have a meeting with them to talk about what's on offer and where we can go from here. The idea is to have better play facilities on offer, and also to be very clear about the age brackets that they're serving, because at the moment they really aren't serving anybody, only the services offered in the adjoining properties. I think the one in Cold Harbour is probably the only play centre that's properly fit for purpose at the moment. The others are in a state of disrepair. So it's going to be a longer piece of work than we imagined to start with. I think it would take some months to finish.
I mean, I know that certainly in my ward we don't have enough ways to entertain young people, so from those teenage years, the adolescent years. So I'm just wondering whether the review will take more of a comprehensive look at the age groups and what is provided where, what is needed, and especially when we're looking at kind of antisocial behaviour and thinking about all of that, it is really about providing the right kind of occupation and incentives and to that group. So so it'd be good to understand whether we're going to look specifically at those kind of issues.
I couldn't have said it better myself.
Councillor Bauer, Councillor Hartley would kill me if I didn't ask a follow-up question on your last answer. And I think given the view that Cold Harbour is the only play centre that is fit for purpose at the moment, would you say that it's pretty certain that facility will stay, maybe with some transformation? And are you able to give that sort of assurance now, that, or is it still one where it will be part of that longer term review?
I think it would be foolish of me to give you an assurance right here and now. there is definitely a need for something in Cold Harbour. Whether it is in the right place at the moment, we're not sure. There's a lot of buildings, as you know, in Cold Harbour where different things are going on and perhaps efficiencies could be made. And that's all up in the air, and it's all to play for at the moment. So I'm really sorry. No, I haven't got an answer for you.
So I guess that the reading of that is there will be one, you just can't say where.
Probably.
Yeah. I just have another question on tennis. Sorry, I know we've covered this extensively as well. You were talking about the around 25,000 court bookings. I didn't see in the report how many bookings we had previously under the old booking system and how much of an increase that was.
We didn't have bookings before, so it's a big increase. So it was done on a walk up version. So this is much more equitable, I would think. So you book it and you're able to get in and play. So there aren't people being disappointed, hopefully.
I don't know how much usage has increased then if it wasn't kind of collected in that way previously.
Yeah, the only data we did have was Blackheath, and we've seen a massive increase in the usage there because of the booking system. So that was the only traditional one we had on the numbers and the bookings. So now we're in a position where we've got a baseline data for 2024 because they were all operationally pay and plays, and all the booking system was in place on the 1st of April 2024. So now we're in the game of we can report back and see how we're getting on, and we can track them. We've been tracking them month by month, so we can do a comparison right the way through now, every quarter in particular, so we can see where we need to change things potentially.
How much did the booking increase in Blackheath? Do you know?
We kept the same price. We went up by it went up by inflation in 2024 by about 30 pence, from £6 a court to £6.30.
Just meant in terms of number of bookings.
Oh, number of bookings. Sorry. We think, if I can remember rightly from data, I can send you the exact data, but it was talking about 3,000 or 4,000 extra bookings because of the refurbs.
Across the 1 year period?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I can send you the exact figures.
That'd be good.
Thank you, Chair. On a different issue, on the Greenwich and Docklands Festival, so up until 2023, there was the Greenwich Fair ran, which saw a lot of events concentrated in the grounds of the Old Royal Naval College. And then last year, the festival took a different approach, so they didn't have the Greenwich Fair, and it saw sort of events much more dispersed across the borough. So I sort of wondered whether we have data on how that affected attendance, and whether going forward the Greenwich Fair would come back, or the sort of more dispersed nature of the festival will carry on.
Thanks, Councillor. That was a conscious decision to make sure that culture reaches every part of the borough. And we were very aware that in previous years it had been concentrated in certain parts. We have got the data. All the organisations that we fund are expected to provide evaluation to us, which then forms part of the funding process for the next round should the same organisations apply. So we can supply that. I don't have that, I'm afraid, to rattle off tonight, but it was a conscious decision just to make that clear.
Yeah, I didn't think it was a bad decision actually, but I was just interested as to whether I don't know whether because before you could have people attending a couple of locations and seeing lots of different shows, whereas it was more kind of strung out. Yeah.
So the only question which I was just thinking about as I was reading the parks thing again, and I'm not sure if this is the right panel for it really, but some of the sort of anecdotal information that I've been getting sort of around my area, which is sort of Plumstead Common, is that there's sort of been an increase in sort of littering and sort of fly tipping, particularly in the parks and open spaces, and particularly in like Boston Woods, we get a lot of that. And actually, there's been a lot more graffiti in Boston Woods. And so I guess if there's anything you can say about why, if that is the case, why that might be, and is there anything that we can do to sort of, you know, tackle that better? Because obviously we love our parks and our woods and all these different things, but if that is seemingly a change, it would be good to sort of find out why.
I'm sure Kate will pick this up afterwards, but certainly in my ward, during this Easter holiday, we have had a big increase in antisocial behaviour in terms of some dumping of things in the lake, litter, some quite nasty incidents with users of the park as well from younger people. And yeah, I think there's certainly been a bit of a rise. We're certainly in the ward working with the policing team and with Barclay to put on events during holidays to make sure that there are things to do other than things that we would rather people were not doing. But I'm going to defer to Kate.
Thank you very much. Yes, there has been a rise in fly tipping and littering in our parks and open spaces, and I would say that that has been the case since we made the changes to our waste collection of the residual waste. But we're working very hard. So we've got our crime team that sit within street services, working hard with the park rangers team to try and eradicate some of the more problematic examples and you know, more regular sites where this is happening. So we're very aware of it, and we're working very hard to try and combat it. The problem is always with trying to effect change to fly tipping is the evidence thresholds that you need to be able to then prosecute somebody or to issue them with a fixed penalty notice. People are getting smarter now. There's not always evidence within the fly tip or the rubbish that leads you to the person that's done it. They might do it in the middle of the night with dark clothing, their face covered. So again, in terms of identifying them, that's a real problem. So, but we keep working hard, and really we need to work with residents to hopefully help us out by identifying people that they know have fly tipped. That's just one element of it. It's not the only thing that we can do. But yeah, certainly we're aware of it, and we'll continue to try and improve the situation.
Thank you. That's really helpful, and it's good to hear that the anecdotal information is reflective of what seems to be happening. I'm sorry.
On that issue, what use do we make of it? We've got quite a lot of CCTV covering road junctions and things. Do we ever make use of it? For example, if you saw a flatbed vehicle, you know, driving somewhere, and then it appears on camera a few minutes later without any loaded with rubbish, and you find a fly tip, do we ever actually use the CCTV evidence to prosecute?
We do, and we've done so very successfully in recent years. So yeah, I haven't got the details of or the examples, but absolutely we can do that, and that's and really the CCTV is at its most useful for vehicles because hopefully they've got their registration number plate on show, and it's a legitimate one. But also, even if it's not. That there's other methods that you can use, and via the police as well to find them as well. So yeah, that's where we get most of our success.
I don't know if we're kind of going off subject a little bit here, but on that I would like to just raise a couple of things. There's been a lot of casework around this, obviously, I'm sure you'll appreciate, and residents have provided kind of photographic evidence on a number of cases with addresses, but we still don't prosecute or don't take it up. Is it because of cost, or what is the level of information we need? I mean, where we've got littering with addresses, obvious fly tipping happening with boxes and addresses on boxes, and we still can't prosecute. I've had lots of residents getting quite upset about that. Why is that?
Yeah, I can't give a specific answer to that, because obviously without knowing each of the cases, but what I do know is that we have a team in street services, which is obviously outside of this remit, that's working very hard to try and bring as many perpetrators to justice as we can. So there's not one singular reason that I'm aware of, but there's multiple factors in trying to bring someone to justice.
Thanks, Kate. Yeah, Councillor Davis.
I'd echo the views on fly tipping, but I actually was jumping back after the discussion on the Docklands Festival. I'd almost forgotten to ask a question about the Christmas event at on Eltham High Street, so don't want to miss an opportunity to do that. I think, obviously, we used to have the big parade, and it's been a point that has been raised in council many times, and to maybe lower my ambition, rather than an event on that scale, I think the complaint that we quite often get from businesses and shops on the high street is that by having it on Passy Place, you're not really spreading the footfall, and so the businesses at the other end of the high street don't really see any benefit from that event. I think we'd all be conscious that the Passy Place event has its place, and that there are positive elements to it. There's some elements that could maybe be a bit better and more ambitious. So is there scope to having a different event in future, maybe starting with this year, and making it so that more businesses and more of the high street is engaged in that event as well?
I should have a placard with my ready pre-prepared answers, shouldn't I, Councillor? To just explain why Eltham lights up again, for the benefit of councillors who may not be aware, the cost of closing a major through road was huge. We had to put forward diversions in conjunction with TfL, and we genuinely found a lot of the shops didn't actually stay open on the high street. I think something you'd agree was the case. So when we had to make cutbacks, one thing that we established with our cabinet member at the time was that we would retain a Christmas event in Eltham, which we have done. We've also often had Sparkle in the Park at Avery Hill Park, I think on 2 occasions, more than any other site in the borough so far. I think the point you make about activity on the far end of the high street is certainly something we can take away, but our budgets haven't increased, as you can imagine, so we still have to work within the same envelope. We have also worked with Councillor, one of your colleagues, Councillor Greenwell, and traders also on the Westmount Parade that you talked about earlier, who've also put on their own event. So again, if traders want to come forward and help the council, because our budgets are limited, so if the local trader association has any money they want to pull with our money, this is something we offered last year. That again would help us put a bigger event on the high street for local residents.
And on that Westmount Parade event, I think that is a really good model for other parades, to jump back to Westmount Parade and sort of how successful it is. I know the council do help with it, but it really is led by the businesses and traders. And so I'd say I think that's a model that is really positive and would work well on the high street as well.
I don't think we'd disagree. I'd again just encourage cooperation between ourselves and traders, because a bigger pool of money means you can do more for the local community rather than 2 separate pots. So that was the principle that, again, with our cabinet members' approval, we'd seek to work to this year.
All right, I think that's all of our questions. Sorry, no, not too soon. Go on, Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. It would be remiss of me not to ask a question about libraries. So I thought it was a good overview of the library service, but I would say it doesn't really do justice to all of the things that go on in the libraries, because there's far more than's in the report. For example, there's business support for startups and continuing company to help them grow. There's employment support, there's digital skills, there's events, loads of social events with things like authors launching their books, some of whom are local. And in the library in my ward, in West Greenwich Library, there's actually a Friends of West Greenwich Library group who operate and, to be honest, run it a bit more as a community centre. They hold events with artists. They sort of have people who've created art in other, I think with Greenwich Community College, and they kind of display it and discuss the art. They have book readings, they watch films in the library, and it's really good to see. So I wondered whether the idea of a Friends model, because that's quite popular with parks, I wonder whether that's something we would expand in other libraries.
That's a very interesting idea. I think, especially with some of the smaller and less used libraries, that's possibly a really good way forward. And I absolutely agree with you. Libraries are a real kind of fantastic community hub that we have in the borough. And we even have the Library of Things in the Woolwich Library. Loads of stuff for families and kids, and during the holidays they put on the reading challenges. They do fantastic work. Would you like to say anything about that, do you think? Okay.
Yeah, I think ultimately any opportunity to engage local residents and users of some of our services and buildings and places has got to be a positive thing, although I wouldn't wish to commit to it without having a conversation with Paul Drum and Richard Gallagher from GLL are with us this evening, which is fantastic, and I'm sure they're delighted to hear all of the positive things that you've mentioned, Councillor Smith, because you're right, we haven't probably touched the sides of the full extent of what our libraries do bring to local people. But I think in principle it's a sound idea, so something we can perhaps look at. Yeah. Come up? Yeah, come up, Paul.
Good evening. Yes, we're very proud of our relationship with our local communities and friends groups. So again, in some of our small libraries like Abbey Wood, Cold Harbour, even our co-located ones like Thamesmead, we work very closely with local community groups and friends. So very closely, especially through our coffee mornings, that they really do bring in the local community groups. So again, Woolwich, second busiest in the country, busiest in London. Again, our local links to the community are essential to bringing people in, and again, we're doing 90,000 free activities a year across all 12 branches, and also we've got a start-up Greenwich service as well. So yeah, I think that, it's a real treasure to work closely with the community to help develop our service and listen to them and improve the variety we do every year. So yeah, absolutely totally agree with you on that point.
All right, thank you very much for coming up, and I think we are now finished, so thank you so much to